So let's start. We're going to talk about Stanford's design system and living style guide. So they're basically both sides of the same coin. So before we start, can I ask the audience some questions? So who knows what a design system is? That's about 20% or maybe more, 30% of people. What about a living style guide? Oh, about the same, maybe even more. And do you know that Stanford has both? Before I tell you? Ooh, so that's a lot less. So only about 5 or 6 people in the audience. So we are going to tell you all about it today. And before I start, I'm going to introduce my co-presenters. So we have Carrie Augenstein and Shay McKinney, and they're both from Stanford Web Services. Carrie is our senior UI UX designer, lead creative, and Shay is our technical architect lead, and he is also the lead on the Decanter project. And I am Yvonne Tang from University Communications, and I'm a front-end developer. I actually put Decanter Rookie there myself, but because this is Google Slides, so someone changed it to Ninja, and that's not me. So I'm the rookie because I've been using this for less than a year. And you know, rookie can give the honest opinion. So this is what I think about Decanter. To me, it's like Lego. So they give me the building blocks. And if you use Decanter to build your sites, they always have a consistent look and they look nice. And it's also efficient. So compared to creating a car from Play-Doh, this is much faster. You can put that car together in 5 seconds. And it passed QA, it's not toxic. And all the pieces fit together. And it's fun to build with. We were just having a conversation, me and my boss, we were saying we're building the latest WordPress theme with Decanter. And it really makes the coding a breeze, and it's really enjoyable. So now Shay is going to give us an overview of Decanter. So he's going to tell you all the W's, the why, what, where, who of Decanter. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then Shay can take over.
Thanks, Yvonne. All right. Let's hope this works. Let me know if you can hear me okay and if you can see what I can see. Thumbs up from one side. How about from the room?
Yes.
I'm hearing yeses, very small. Quite quiet, so if you have any questions, Yvonne, please proxy, but I'll get through this. So we're gonna talk about Decanter and the what, where, where, who, as we go. So, okay, this is a little bit slow on this one. So why are we building Decanter? So we all of us that work at Stanford have a job to do, and primary goal is to serve Stanford and to do the best we can. So with that spirit in mind, we're building Decanter for everybody that works at Stanford, designers, developers alike, so that they can build modern, branded, and compelling designs and websites that conform to university policies and guidelines, with the end goal of making it easy for those that are creating content. So we want to be able to communicate very clearly, very efficiently, and well. And that goes right from thinking about websites to developing websites to actually working in your content management or just straight up HTML of source. But the idea is that this is for everybody. We're here to share. Put a lot of thought into it too, quite frankly. So, okay, so what is it? We came up with this kind of cute little acronym. We call it an app. It's not an app, it's like you can download and put it on your phone, but we call it an artifact in the sense that there's a design library we have in Figma, and we've got a bunch of code that's a living style guide that's up on a website, decanter.stanford.edu. Oh, I know I'm giving that away early, but you can help do that if you have a device in the crowd. But it's also a process. So we've done a lot of critical thinking. We've got a number of different individuals are contributing. So we have 2 groups of Stanford Web Services and University Communications. which a number of you are in the crowd. Put your hand up if you're a part of those teams, and let us know. But we've been working together and have been able to put together a awesome project that we call Decanter. So it's all of the above. It's the creative, the code, and all the people that are involved. So it's open source. It's available. It's on GitHub. It's on Figma, and we'll get into those nitty-gritty stuff a little bit later. All right, a little bit more detail, and I'm going to have to move all of my Zoom stuff around to get this to work. But so what does this look like a little bit? So like I said, we have a Figma design library. We've got some code within there. We've got a lot of core elements, like things like we've talked about with colors and typography. We've got a grid system. Actually got two, more on that later. We've got elements in there. We've got a number of components and that we can use and reuse. So stuff that you may have seen before has now been bundled into this, like the global footer and some of your branding, like up in the header, the lockup and stuff. And lots of flexible, responsive layouts. We've got two systems that can work with that. We've got the Figma and the code, and they can help facilitate individual site designs and working with other things like integration with Drupal or WordPress or whatever your custom site is. So lots of really good stuff in there. So I use Decanter. From the software, computer science side of things, we want to be dry, don't repeat yourself. So we want a concise code base of reusable patterns. So we want to make sure that we are very efficient in what we do. So it gives you both speed in both design and the development of your projects that you're working with, because there are two complementary systems. It's a user-centered foundation for all things in web. So again, lots of research, UX-driven solutions that are in there. We've got modern browser support and a mobile-first approach. We are going to be conforming to university policies and guidelines. So accessibility is a forethought, and we've got lots of work happening on that, and also branding, which is really good. Collaboration, we are open, and with many hands help continue to make this better and keep improving. With having a system and having individuals be able to collaborate, we also get the efficiencies of being able to share. So those that are using the same tools can also then share work. All of that should help the cognitive load reduction of all of us as builders, but also as our end users, because they're able to have things that are consistent and intuitive. So a little history on the project. 2016, the University of Communications began the redesign for Stanford.edu. They had a developer, unfortunately no longer with us, Kevin Garcia. He started working on a project called Brunch at Stanford. It had a bunch of front-end tools to help facilitate that. With that, Stanford Web Services and University of Communications identified they wanted to work closer together because we do a lot of the same stuff. So David Tom, who's in the crowd, put up your hand. He connected myself and Kevin Garcia, put us in a room and had us arm wrestle to find out what can we actually do to share. So we talked about the technical side of things, and we came up with an overlap in that we both use CSS and Sass and pretty similar stuff, actually. So we came up with an idea that we'll create a Sass library. We called it Decanter. A lot of the work that had been done early on was based off of Thoughtbots, Bourbon, Neat, and Bitters. So it was kind of a vessel to contain our code. 2018, we did some more work. Somewhere in there. And it's 2019 now. Where are we? So we built a design artifact and pattern library. So that was the code and the Figma design document that we're talking about. We released a version 5. So we've been through a few iterations over the years, which is great. We've been working to negotiate an enterprise license for Figma, so everybody can have it. University Communications and Stanford Web Services can continue to work on a service model as we continue to have regular sprints. We talk in a Slack channel. We've got a backlog of work that we want to do. We've got a wiki of information that's happening. We're adding components all the time, and we've got lots of layouts. Lots of good stuff there. Who's been a part of this? So a lot of names here. So thank you to everybody on this name and anybody that I've missed. But we've got a lot of individuals who have poured a lot of time, effort, and support into this project. So thank you very much to everybody there. And we hope to see this list grow as we go. So I'm going to hand it over to Carrie, who can then go through some of the good stuff. So now I've stopped my rant, and I'll let, oh, sorry, I got feedback. Oh, wait. Let Carrie go.
I'm going to read that too. tiny bit of echo in the room. If you speak a tiny, okay, I will speak slowly.
Yeah, sorry. I have a bad habit of doing that.
That's okay. I will try to speak slowly. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. We're gonna do a little walkthrough of this design language library. So I'm gonna wait a minute just to make sure that everyone in the room can see my screen. Let's see, Yvonne, can I see a thumbs up? Can you wiggle that thumb in front of when you can see my screen? Awesome. Shay, you can see the screen too?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay, cool. So, okay, so we're gonna do a little walkthrough of Figma. So let me just back up for a second. Couple things. So you can see at the bottom of my screen or in this cover here that we have a number of designers, UX designers, from multiple teams working on Decanter. Two of whom are no longer with Stanford Web Services or UConn, so John Holloman and Joe Knox. So your leaders are now Carrie Augenstein and Ishita Shah. I think Ishi's in the room with you today. Ishi, wave your hand if you're sitting there so everyone can see you, and then torch you with questions after. So the history goes back to John and Kevin. So John and Kevin were the initiators from the design side. They spent a lot of time on stanford.edu. Yeah, thumbs up. Okay, cool. Just looking at the comments here in the chat. So John and Kevin kind of initiated this library, and eventually Joe and I got to get involved. John was the person who pushed for Figma. So one of the major reasons we're in Figma, because I imagine a number of you might ask about Sketch or other design tools. Figma is 100% collaborative. So if you can see, well, you can see me twice up here. But the ability to see your teammates inside of the design tool at the same time, much like Google Drive, makes for quite a nice design experience. We don't have to worry about keeping things up to date and all of that for versioning and pulling things down and putting things back up. So that was a big draw. There are a lot of other things about Figma that work really well as well. Okay, so the two reasons to have a design language library in a design tool. One, because we're an integrated software development team, we want to make sure that we not only have developers, but we also have designers on the UX side and the visual design side, also partnering with product, so that we get the cycles of iterations working as a unit, so that all of those things are taken care of, both on the display side, the interaction side, accessibility, all those things. So we need all those kinds of brains in the room to make sure that that'll happen. So we're building this tool so that we can build the code artifact. It's sort of a little bit ahead of a lot of the code. And then ultimately you end up with a thing that becomes an artifact that you can use for efficiency. So what we're hoping to do as we get this enterprise license and as this library grows is to be able to release it out to our Stanford community so that you all can use it and make your design artifacts happen a lot more efficiently, particularly if you think about any designers in the room thinking about just building a masthead, the Stanford brand bar, the Stanford global footer. Having to build those things out on your own can take some time, and having to build your own libraries, we don't all need to be doing that and wasting effort and time, honestly. So that's a lot of the reason that we're building this to begin with. Okay, so I'm just gonna walk you through a few of the things that exist in this tool. This visual guidelines section to me is the most important part of the design tool. So in here you'll start to see, let me just zoom in a little bit. You'll see that we've broken things down right into breakpoints from the base of the tool. So here you're seeing grids go across from the breakpoints that we've established for a number of reasons. You can answer questions about that if you have any, but you can see all the grids going up right up to 1500 pixels and then beyond. Let me just back out again. You can see some attempts at modular spacing. We can talk about that, modular. So we're trying to be efficient with the system that we're building, also in the design side from a modular perspective. So not just thinking about blocks, reusable components, but also thinking about the graphic design as modular tools as well. So building a modular system for spacing so that as things scale down, we don't have to think about applying teeny tiny tweaks to breakpoints because the system is already in place. And so if there's this much space on desktop, it'll scale down to this much space on mobile. Same goes for your typography. So let me just scroll over here and I'll back out a little bit. So you can see how we've thought about typography in XXL, that's our XXL breakpoint, and then how it's scaling down right into mobile. And that goes for all of these styles that we're creating. The idea is to reuse these styles as much as possible in all of our designs so that we don't have to think about responsive, because responsive is pretty complicated. We don't want to have to think about those things if we can avoid it. And you're seeing color over here, and then some drop shadows and even aspect ratios for some blocks and rectangles and circles and things. Okay, so I'll quickly show you some of the components that we've built out. So taking those visual guidelines and applying them to components like a hero banner. So hero banner with an overlay. What's happening on the hero banner as it scales down across responsive right down to mobile. How about a postcard? So you're seeing at the top, a postcard. The postcard that we're creating has variable content. Let me just show you that really quickly. So the variable content can include a superhead, a headline, body copy, a CCA link, or a button. So clearly we don't want, necessarily want an author filling out both a CCA link and a button, but it's an option. And then if you go down, you can see, oh, I've only filled out the image and the headline and the body. And here I'm using image, headline, body, button. You can also see us starting to work with marking the modular spacing again here by marking the padding and the margin bottom and the margin top, things like that, little details. Again, we can answer questions about that at the end. Okay, so there's a few more you can see now. I'm going to show you really quickly. Of course, as usual, we have a growing backlog, so we have a lot of work to do. To date, this has been a little bit of a skunk works project for a lot of our teammates. We're trying to get work in as much as possible, but as you can imagine, we're trying to also build this kind of on the sidelines. So there's still quite a bit of work to be done. We talked about the Figma enterprise license going out to campus, but even as that's happening, we still have so much work to be done. There's still quite a bit of components that you're probably going to want that might not be built out just yet. But that being said, let me show you an example of actually using Figma. Okay, so I've broken out into a new tab, and I want to show you how easy it is, just even to get your masthead and maybe some components in there. Okay, so once you're in Figma, you can drop in what's called a frame, and this is going to be your artboard. I'm going to pick basically let's see, do we want a MacBook? I'm going to pick a MacBook Pro because that's the same width that I want. Okay, so that's 1440, so that's going to render at the right size if I bump this out into my prototype tab, which I'll show you in just a second. And then I want to grab my Stanford library. So over here in assets, now I've already turned this on, but I'm going to show you what I did. So you go over to this little book, you would have access through enterprise to all these different libraries that we would release, but the one that you want is Stanford Design Library. So I'm going to turn that on. And then you can see all of those assets populating on the left under my assets tab. So I'm going to close that. Now I have access to everything that we've built out in our Figma library. Okay, so clearly we're going to need our brand bar first because that's one of the most important elements on the items that we build. And you can see that it's already optimized. It's coming in with its grid. I can even include my grid. There's my layout grid, and I want to pull. So there's pulling right from that library. So I'm going to turn on my extra large grid because that's what my MacBook Pro is calling, and my brand bar is pulling right into that grid. So that's awesome. We've got 12 columns across. And let's include, let's see, we're going to need the global footer too, so I'm going to throw that in. Okay, so I've already got, in a matter of seconds, I've already got my brand bar and my global footer. What else is kind of difficult and tricky to have to build all the time? Our mastheads or headers or navigation element, however you choose to call it. So we have 3 different options. We have a center, we have left aligned, we have right aligned. I particularly like the right aligned, so I'm going to pull that in. And there you go. So I've got my brand bar, my masthead with some dummy content right in that navigation. I've got my global footer. And maybe I could add in a card or two. Or maybe, let's see, a banner. Let me pull this in. So here's my, I pulled in the wrong one. Okay, so you can see the Figma is telling me that it's 800 pixels wide, and that's obviously too narrow. So let's pull in the right one, extra large. So there's my hero component, right? Dropping in, and I can put an image in the background there. Another thing that Figma does that's kind of cool, I'm going to mark this as I want to stick it to the bottom so that when I open up my board, it scrolls right along with it. So it's hugging the bottom of that board, so when I open it up, it sticks as a footer. So that's a really short demo of what we can do with the language library. And as you can see, there's still a lot of components, as you can imagine, that we want to build out. But even just that, getting you started with header, footer, and maybe a hero banner in there is pretty fast. This has made my work significantly more efficient with some of the new websites that we're building over at Stanford Web Services. So I'm going to stop sharing. So Yvonne can come back and tell you about the Decanter side, which is the code library for the front end design.
Thank you, Gary. Let me share my screen. So please bear with us a little bit because we don't have HDMI connection in this room. So what you're seeing here is kind of a mobile version of the site because we don't have high enough resolution, but that just proves a point. Sites built with Decanter is responsive. So they work with any device width. So this is the Decanter website. The URL is decanter.stanford.edu. And it's public, it's live, you can go to it now. And this is actually our what's called a living style guide. So it reflects what's most current in our code base. So whenever we add a component, any new features, we try to push a newest version to this website. So think of it as a showcase. So you can go here and do your window shopping and see what's available to you. So the site itself, as I said, is built with Decanter itself. You can see the brand bar, and this menu here is available to you. So what you're seeing here is the mobile version. And this is a card component, for example. It's pretty flexible. You can customize it. So I'm going to start by going into the components section because that one is most visual. And it's also where we put all the Stanford branded elements. So the structure of this page is once you click into a section, you see a sidebar, and it will show you a list of the sections in the subsections in that section. So all the components here available. And I'm actually just going to scroll down so you can see all of them. Let me know if you want me to go slower. So you have the name of the component and some documentation describing what it is, and sometimes it will tell you how to use it in the code as well. And the first element is always the default style. And some components have multiple flavors. So for example, chocolate ice cream. You can have these we call variants. So you can have chocolate ice cream with fudge or chocolate chips. So for example, the default alert is this one with the gray background, and then we have the variants comes after. And what you see here in bold is the class name of that component that you can use in your code. And then here, you can expand this box that says markup. And then you can see the HTML we use. And that is generated by Twig. And Twig is the templating engine for PHP. And here you can actually find the directory to the Twig file in our code base. So if you pull down the whole code base from Decanter, you can go into the Twig file and look at the documentation. So they come with variables that you can pass on to the templates from your CMS of choice. So for example, JB and I are working on passing WordPress variables into these trick templates. So this is the brand bar that Carrie was showing you, all 4 colors. And they are also identical to the ones in the Identity Toolkit website. And this is actually, whatever here is the more updated version. And we have some basic elements like buttons. And you can see as I hover over it, you will see it has hover stay and also focus stay. So we took care of those for you. And this is the cards that Carrie was showing you. So we have the default vertical style and also a horizontal variant. And you can choose to, so trick templates, they have some logic, and you can choose to say include a super headline or not include a button, for example. So it's pretty flexible how you want to customize this. And this is a call to action block. See, as you hover over it, the whole thing is clickable. And these are the variants with icons or button in the middle. And here is our global footer. So because of the resolution of the projector, you can see it very well. So I'm going to click this little icon and go into the full screen mode. And you can preview this in full screen. And as I resize the browser, you can see it's responsive. And also, all the links are actually hard-coded into the trick template, so you don't have to make sure the link's most updated. We took care of that for you. So you can just plug this whole thing into your website. And then that's the hero component. It looks better on the desktop, I promise. And then you have all the link variants. So for example, this one has some animation and some with the button styles. And this is actually another highlight of this section. So I'm sure those of you who have seen Stanford websites, you're familiar with the department lockups. So we have all 20 options available for you. So yes, they all exist. And we've done them all, and it's standardized, so you don't have to worry about, you know, the logo is bigger on this side and smaller on that one, and everything lines up. And also, if I resize the browser, you can see we take care of the responsive behavior for you. So they all stack on top of each other. And we have also tested anything on IE 11 and 10. So they work in IE and Edge also. And here's the logo. And the main nav is actually another one I want to talk about. So we put a lot of effort into making sure the navigation is accessible. So those of you who has built a navigation menu with drop downs, you might know it is always tricky to make sure it works with screen readers and also keyboard users. So we did a lot of research, and we have some documentation actually in GitHub, and also the link here about the main nav component, and you can read all about it. So it works with keyboard, and what you're seeing here, unfortunately, is the mobile version because of the resolution again. You can go home and look at this on your desktop. So we have the default. So the mobile version looks like, it behaves kind of like an accordion. And we have light color themes, and then we have one even white on dark color for you. And we even have one that includes the site search inside and different alignments. So check that out. And now I'm going to show you the core section. So here is where all the Stanford colors are. So they're identical to the one in the Identity Toolkit website, the color palettes. And here they exist in the form of Decanter variables. So you can just use the variable. You don't have to go to Identity Toolkit and look up the hex color. It's very convenient. And I also want to highlight the fonts. So it includes our two primary fonts, two primary web fonts, Source Sans Pro and Source Serif Pro. And those are the official two Stanford web fonts, now the primary web fonts. And we also have a slab font, and then a script/handwriting font. And we even have sans script support for you if you need that for your website. And now let me go into the element section. What it is HTML elements, and also include things like typography. So Carrie was showing you the typography section in the Figma document. So you have styles for intro tags, splash fonts, and captions, credits, and all these are here available for you. And they are responsive, so the font size is smaller if you're on mobile. So you don't have to worry about having to take care of that yourself. So there are two ways of using them. You can add class names to the section that you're using this font style. So as you see here, for example, here is .su credits. So that's the class name. And then the way I actually prefer to use these styles is through the use of mix-ins. So what mix-ins are, they are some little helper functions that help you write blocks of CSS styles, and it saves you time. So here, if you look into the mix-in section in the sidebar, I'll start with the typography. So you can see how the same thing can be generated using two different methods. So you can see here, I'm in the typography section, and you have these mix-in functions for big paragraph, credits, caption. So you can use these as well. And then that way you don't have to use the Decanter classes. So you can just say, for example, you use a regular H1 heading and then give it a style of splash font, for example. And I'm going to talk about, there's a lot of useful mix-ins here. And I actually make myself a list of what I'm going to show you, some of the more useful and the useful ones that I use every day. And one is the, okay, here it is, the Breakpoint section. So those of you who build websites, you know, you always have to write media queries. So you have different styles for different breakpoints. So here we have some helpers for you to write these media queries. So you have, for example, Great Media, you start at the XS breakpoint here, and you can do between two breakpoints and with the maximum up to a certain breakpoint. And I could actually show you an example. So this is a site that we are building using Decanter. And could you see the code here? So this is how I'm using the mix-in. For example, I want to write a media query that works for small breakpoint or lower. So here I'm using the add include Great Media small. So that's how I'm using the mix-in in that section to create my media queries. So that one is useful. I use it at least 10 times a day. And then another one I want to talk about is there are a lot of mix-ins for Flexbox. And there's some documentation here as well. So please take a look if you like to use them. So it creates grid layout in Flex for you. And we also have a lot of CSS grid mix-ins. So if you prefer to use CSS grid layout, you can look at this section. And it all follows what's in the Figma document. So it's one-to-one. And it used we have 6 breakpoints. and it incorporates all of that, so you don't have to worry about dealing with that yourself. And another important section in the mixing section is the modular spacing and modular typography. So let me see if I have Figma here. So here's my Figma, and then so Carrie showed you this earlier. And oh, there it is. So here is the modular spacing in Figma. So you can see these are units of spacing for each breakpoint. And then here is the modular typography down here. You might not be able to see it very well, but for example, you can see this is for large breakpoint. And then the modular scale step 0 is the base font size for that breakpoint. And then you can choose to go back up a step through from 1 to 4, or you can go down to all the way to -4. So if you use this mixin, you don't have to take care of font size, write your own media query. It's really convenient. So feel free to take a look at the documentation. I personally use this a lot in my work, and it shows you examples of how do you use it. So now I'm going to take you to another section that might be really useful for you. So Shay and Joe spend a lot of time creating Flexbox and CSS grid layouts. So these are, you can use these with the class name. So they have layouts from 1 to 4 columns. So I'm going to scroll down quickly so you can take a look. So these are really practical layouts. So I can actually see people using these. They're pretty common with header and sidebars. And so you can use these with class names. And then because there are Flexbox and CSS grid layout, you can choose whichever that works better for your system. So for example, this one is called Pac-Man in CSS grid, and it looks basically, I mean, exactly the same as the Flexbox one. And we've tested these in IE 11 and 10, and also Microsoft Edge, and they all work. So you don't have to worry about browser compatibility. We take care of that for you, because that is usually the most time-consuming part. So now I am actually going to take you to our GitHub repo. So if you go to our menu and go to the resources tab and click the first link, it's going to take you to the GitHub repo. So I'll just show you really quickly here. So the wiki is where you can find information about installation, and then more documentation about the grid system and on accessibility and more browser support, etc. And when we find an issue, we usually go here. So here you can see the top one that I created, a bug report. So I noticed something is behaving strangely. And then I actually found a solution. So I pull down the main branch and then clone it, do some work on it. And then when I'm ready, I open a pull request. So here you can see, this is my pull request to respond to that issue. And I'm going to click on it and then let you see, we actually have a lot of discussion. So we do code review. We usually involve at least one person from each team to review our code. So you can be assured that the code is robust. and it's also CMS agnostic because Stanford Web Services use Drupal, and then UCOM use WordPress. So we have people on both teams looking at it, and you can see how here we have this discussion going on. And this is JB. She's not letting me go easy. You see all these comments. And then quickly about the code. So click on the code tab, and everything you care about is in the core folder. So there's a source folder and a distribution folder. So the SRC is for source. And here is where you can find the trick templates, and then the SAS files and JavaScript source files. And JavaScript's written in ES6. And then, but we have Webpack with Babel to transcribe it to ES5 that will work with IE. So this is where this folder is where the compiled CSS and JavaScript files are. So I'm going to go back to the slides. Where am I? Let me see. So the question, where are we headed with this? So of course, ongoing is integration with Stanford Web Services Drupal 8 sites, and then UCOM's new WordPress template. And we are negotiating an enterprise license for Figma. So if anyone's interested in a seat for your designer, you see the really cool mock-up that Carrie was able to generate, talk to David Tom or Scott Stalker, and I have their email at the end. And we are still working on service model governance, and there will be more documentation and examples coming. So we will have examples showing you how to actually use this tool. And we actually have a dedicated sprint. So we are actively adding more components to Decanter. And the next one is actually the beginning of June. So in about a couple of weeks, we'll have a whole week working on this. And then of course, the goal is to make this available to all of you at Stanford. So hopefully by now you're feeling like this cat asking whether you can have this, and that's actually my cat. And the answer is yes, you may, even though if you're not my cat. So what can you do now? So I would encourage you to check out the Decanter website to see what's available to you and look at the documentation. And then go to our GitHub repo. It has information on installation. It has the wiki with more documentation on some components, accessibility. And there's also a Slack channel, Decanter. Right now, it's just mostly the designers and developers chatting. But if you're keen on hearing what we're doing or talk to us, you can ask for an invite and we can get you into the Slack channel. And so this is the part when I talk about the Figma Enterprise License. So David, Tom, or Scott Stalker, those are the two gentlemen you should contact if you're interested in a seat for the Figma. So they're in the audience, so they just raised their hand. So Scott and David. Can't escape. So any questions? So I'm gonna stop sharing the screen. And I'm going to unmute Shay and Carrie. And so any questions from our audience? Yes. So the question is, so the markup in Figma is dynamic, and then is there a way to map it to the code if you're using, for example, jQuery? Is that the question? So maybe Shay could answer that one.
Let's see if I can sort this out. The design library and the code are supposed to reflect one another, but it's due to effort, not any sort of automation that happens between. So we spend a lot of time talking about how to implement things, and we're very critical about the implementation of those in the code level. So maybe there is a way to provide a robust method to export out of Figma. We definitely had a ticket to look into that in the future, but at the moment it's due to a lot of hard work and good work.
Yvonne mentioned at one point that the code is the most up-to-date, and there's a reason for that. One, because our team is really focusing on making sure that your code is going to be the thing that should be the most up-to-date because your websites are live. On the design language library side, it's very likely that there are certain things that we're going to be able to stay very up-to-date on, like mastheads, things that are, you know, like at that really high level. But like all design tools, the thing is not code. And so, yeah, we still have that. There still is that transfer. So you can expect that some things in the library might not quite keep up with that code system, unfortunately, because of that effort. So the way that we like to talk about it internally is that it should make your work more efficient, but it's very likely that, just like we're doing at SWS and at UCOM, that you're adding a lot on top of those components that are built out to be an accelerant.
JB has a question.
Actually, you might also add that if you are using the code, it doesn't dictate what JavaScript library you use. There's a very little bit of JavaScript in Decanter, and it's just an ABS6. And when you're building on top of Decanter, we recommend that you use Webpack, and you can import any library you want for your code system. Just because you're using Decanter, that's not impacted in any way what tools you use.
So I'll repeat JB's answer to the question. So Decanter doesn't dictate what JavaScript framework you use or what tools you use. We use Webpack, and you can also use Webpack, but you can pick your own tools. Any more questions in the audience? And who's interested in using Decanter? Great, more people. That's awesome. So any more questions? Oh, we have one. Actually, just now I actually forgot to show you some sites that was built with Decanter. And I would say JB and I start building a new WordPress theme, and we've only worked on it really earnestly for maybe a month and a half. And we got it to a state where it looks pretty good. So I'll actually share my screen really quickly. So here is our Redwood theme. So this is still the mobile version, but you can see here it's a pretty built out site, and with different layouts and widgets. And we include a lot of options on this theme. And it only took us about a month and a half to get here. So it really speeds up our development process. And Shay is actually going to talk about the future of Drupal 8 sites. Actually, that reminds me, I'm going to show you this slide where there are related talks today on Sites Built with Decanter. So you might be interested in going to some of these sessions. So right here. So all the sessions today are in this room. And then Scott is presenting on an event calendar site that he's building with Decanter. And it's a custom Java PHP application. And then JB is going to present at 1 o'clock here on our new WordPress theme, Redwood, as built with Decanter also. And then at 4 o'clock today, Stanford Web Services is going to talk about the future of Drupal 8 sites that are also using Decanter. So if you're interested in finding out more, please go to one of these sessions or all of them.
So mostly Decanter is CSS and TypeScript, so it's very independent of CMS, but it also which really accelerate the use of Decanter. So if you are using a system that can use Twig, you'll get even more benefit because you can just get the markup as well. But if all you are able to use is CSS and the JavaScript, you'll still be going a lot faster. So they just need to work a little bit harder to get the actual markup. So, and Scott at 11 o'clock is going to demonstrate his event calendar, which is not actually. So we may talk about how he was able to mark up out. Super easy.
So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please come to any one of us and we'll be happy to answer.